Have you ever really thought about your name? Where it came from? What it means? Today, we're diving deep into Jhumpa Lahiri's incredible novel, The Namesake. It's this amazing story about family, identity, and what it's like to be caught between two worlds, and it all revolves around one single, very perplexing name.
Let's just jump right in with a line from the book itself. For our main character, his name isn't just a label, it's a problem. Right from the get-go, it's just this weird namesake. And honestly, that one feeling, that's the engine that drives this entire story.
So, who is this boy? Meet Gogol Ganguli. He's the American-born son of Bengali immigrants, and his name, the one that causes him so much trouble, is not Bengali, it's not American, it's Russian, the last name of a famous, long-dead writer. So how in the world did that happen?
Well, the story behind the name is actually incredibly personal and pretty intense. See, when Gogol's father, Ashok, was a young man back in India, he was in this absolutely devastating train wreck, and he believes, with all his heart, that the only reason he survived is because he was clutching a book of short stories by the Russian author Nikolai Gogol. So for Ashok, the name isn't weird at all. It's a symbol of his second chance at life. It's a tribute, but it's also a name that carries this heavy, unspoken trauma that his son is now forced to carry without ever really understanding the full weight of it.
And that brings us to the real weight of this name. Because what feels like a miracle to the father, well, it feels more like a curse to the son who's just trying to grow up and fit in suburban America. And this all comes to a boiling point in one really powerful scene. So let's set the scene. Gogol is 11. He's at that super awkward age, where anything that makes you even slightly different feels like a giant, flashing spotlight pointed right at you. His class goes on a field trip to a historic New England graveyard. Now, for his classmates, it's just a kind of boring history lesson. But for Gogol, this place is completely alien. His family's customs around death are totally different. So this whole idea of wandering among stone tablets it's not part of his world at all. And this is where everything crystallizes for him. While his classmates are doing pencil rubbings of familiar names, Smith, Jones, whatever, Gogol has this profound, crushing realization. His family name, Ganguli, will never be on one of these stones. He knows that, by tradition, his body will be cremated. And in that moment, his name just becomes this symbol of the massive, unbridgeable gap between him and the country he was born in. He feels like a permanent outsider. So you see, Gogol's struggle isn't really just about a weird name. It's about something much, much bigger. It's about that fundamental challenge of figuring out who you are when you're caught between two different worlds. It's a classic story of the diaspora.
Okay, so let's just make sure we're on the same page with that word, diaspora. It's basically about communities of people who are living outside their ancestral homeland. And for the children of immigrants, people like Gogol, this creates this constant, really complex negotiation of, okay, who am I? Where do I actually belong? And what parts of my heritage do I keep? Now, Lahiri does something absolutely brilliant here. She contrasts Gogol's journey with his younger sister's Sonia. You see, her Bengali name, Sonali, easily and naturally shortens to the very American-sounding Sonia. For her, the whole process is pretty smooth, she's confident, she fits in. But for Gogol, that same journey is just this constant uphill battle, which eventually leads him to legally change his name to Nickel.
But here is the genius twist. When he renames himself Nickel, it isn't a total rejection of his past, not at all. Nickel was actually the good name his parents had always intended for him. And, get this, it has this clear phonetic echo of Nikolai, the first name of the Russian author himself. So his big act of rebellion is actually this deeply complex negotiation. He's trying to claim his own identity, but he's also unconsciously reconnecting with the very history he was trying so desperately to escape.
Okay, so we've established the core conflict, right? A Bengali boy with a Russian name feels completely out of place in America. It's the whole point of the novel. But what if that central idea is built on a very specific and very telling piece of missed history? And this is where the story gets really, really fascinating, thanks to some amazing work by a literary critic named Sanjukta Dasgupta. She asks this one provocative question. What if a Bengali boy with a Russian name wasn't actually strange? What if, historically speaking, it was kind of normal? So check this out. It turns out there's this long, incredibly rich history of cultural exchange between Bengal and Russia. I mean, a Russian linguist founded the first modern Bengali theater way back in 1795. Russian authors were massively popular. And here's the kicker. The name Gogol itself actually became a pretty common pet name in 1960s Bengal, all thanks to a popular kids' detective series.
As Dasgupta herself puts it, back in Bengal, the name Gogol wouldn't have produced any culture shock. So what this means is that the alienation Gogol feels is completely specific to his experience in America. Which leads to the big question. If Lahiri leaves this entire historical context out of the novel, why?
Well, this so-called missed history isn't a flaw in the book. In fact, it's absolutely central to the story that Lahiri is trying to tell about what it feels like to be part of the diaspora.
To get why, you have to understand Ashok's background. He comes from this educated, middle-class Bengali culture that had a deep, deep reverence for European literature. There's a word for this mindset: Europhilism. His grandfather literally told him, "Read all the Russians. They will never fail you." And that explains why, in a moment of life-or-death crisis, turning to a Russian author felt completely natural to him.
So here's the crucial point. The fact that Ashok never explains this rich Russo-Bengali history to his son, that is the story. The novel's incredible power comes from showing us this gap in cultural memory. It perfectly captures that disconnect that so many second-generation kids feel. You inherit these fragments of your parents' culture, but you don't get the full context, leaving you to try and piece together your own identity all on your own.
The scholar Bill Ashcroft has this fantastic term for this whole process: unnaming. For someone in the diaspora, a name isn't just some fixed label. The struggle with it, questioning it, fighting it, changing it, is an act of unnaming. It's all about breaking down an identity that was given to you to make space for something brand new. Gogol's journey isn't just about finding the right name, it's about claiming the power to define himself on his own terms.
And that leaves us with the huge question that beats at the very heart of the namesake. Is our identity defined by the stories and the histories that are handed down to us, or is it something that we actually have the power to create for ourselves? The novel seems to suggest that the real answer is a beautiful, messy, and lifelong negotiation between the two.